Welcome to episode number 165 of CXOTalk. I'm Michael Krigsman, and I'm speaking today with Matt Preschern, who is the Chief Marketing Officer of HCL Technologies. HCL is a huge company, and Matt, how are you? And tell us briefly about HCL.
Hello, Michael, and everyone. Thank you so much for having me back on CXOTalk. Just a brief summary or introduction about HCL. When I joined HCL in September of 2014, we were roughly a $6 billion global IT services company with about 95,000 employees. Today, we are just about a $7 billion IT services company with roughly 105,000 employees. Our core services are in the infrastructure space. We're very proud to, in 2015, have crossed the 2 billion mark just in our infrastructure services line. We have a very strong heritage in engineering services, roughly about a $1.2 billion business that's growing in 20+% range. We also are quite active in the application services space. Our largest vertical in that area is financial services, and we compete in other verticals just as well, such as manufacturing and various other industries. In addition to that, if you just look at our revenue mix, we have about 60% of our revenue in North America, with an employee base of about 10,000 people here in North America. About 30 to 35% of our revenue comes from Europe, a significant growth market for us. And then we have a pretty strong foothold as well in Australia, in Singapore, in South America, and other parts of the world. The only other thing I would mention about HCL, if you have not heard of us, we grew in 2015 at 15%. Constant currency revenue growth, off a base of $6 billion. I think it's a quite significant growth trajectory. And we pride ourselves that we have a employee-centric corporate culture. So in our view, the notion of employees first, customers second. Our employees are the ones who interact with our customers on a day in and day out basis. And they're a core aspect of our growth. They're a core aspect of the core values that we hold near and dear, which are around trust, transparency, and flexibility.
So you're a $7 billion company with 100,000 employees, and it's a big company. I need to also say that Matt has had the flu, and so I'm particularly grateful that you're joining us here today. It's interesting that you talk about employees first, customers second. You talk about your culture. Recently, I've had several CEOs on CXOTalk who have given the same message. And maybe can you describe why do you put it that way, employees first, customers second? Because we hear in the media all the time, customers first, customers first. So why the focus on employees in this way?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I'm actually quite. It's very encouraging to hear that this notion of a focus on employees seems to become more a focus across various industries. For us, the basic notion is, we believe firmly that it's not only our salespeople who interact with our customers, but our own employees, our frontline employees, are the ones who actually drive day-to-day interactions. If we, and we do, put our focus on empowering them, creating an environment where they can succeed, working to give them the tools and the processes so that they can take actions and then work on behalf of our customers, we feel that they are, in fact, our strongest brand advocates. And we call them the ideapreneurs. We have a range of programs that we run every year that go from online programs to lead generation type of efforts with incentives, as well as personal interactions with our senior executives. And then, very importantly, we really believe that our corporate culture, as I stated before, trust, transparency, and flexibility is in fact what allows us to deliver ultimately relationships with our customers that go above and beyond the contract. So it's a philosophy that HCL had started even prior to me joining. I can personally tell you it's a great element, and it's something that actually makes you very proud to be part of such a great company that's growing at the rate and pace that we are.
So you're growing. You said, did you say your revenues grew 15%? Was that it?
We're about 13.5% at constant currency, correct, in 2015.
Okay, so it's almost 15%, and which is a very high number for a $7 billion organization. So can you make a linkage between this approach of employees first, customer second, and then you said the culture was transparency,
trust, and flexibility.
Transparency, trust, transparency, and flexibility. So can you connect those dots for us, the growth with that approach that you've just got?
So what we can do is a couple of things. One is we would assert that our culture, in fact, is and has been since the beginning, right? We're one of only a handful of companies. We're the 1-5-15. $1 billion in revenue, $5 billion in $1 billion in net income, $5 billion in revenue, $15 billion in market cap since 2000 when we became public, right? We would assert that our culture, which has been at the core as described, is in fact allowing us to reinvent ourselves, to maintain a level of almost a startup culture within a large organization. And it allows us, so far to continue to focus on the things that we're describing. With respect to a direct revenue linkage, what I can tell you is that we have various employee-focused programs. One of them, which we call Lead Gen, where we in fact provide our frontline delivery employees with an opportunity to not only identify key customer pain points and issues, but to bring them forward and to then help resolve them. And I can tell you just this past year, we generated or we tracked over $500 million in incremental revenue just by employees who are not sales employees, but delivery employees who are focusing in on that. Again, I also spend a lot of time with our customers. And I can tell you, we just recently held 2 customer advisory councils, and one in North America in New Orleans and one in Europe in Manchester, with each just about 20 of our top customers. And the one resounding feedback that we receive from our customers is, look, please do not lose what has brought you to this point. When you engage with us, you resolve issues at a rate and pace that almost nobody else in the industry does. You focus in on us, and then, one of our brand promises is a relationship beyond the contract, or as one customer stated, when an issue arises, HCL never goes back and looks at the fine print in the contract. HCL shows up and focuses on the issues at hand and then resolves them so that it's to the benefit of the customer and ultimately to, I think, the benefit of the overarching relationship. So yes, we're very proud of our culture, and we believe it's a differentiating factor as we move forward into 2016 and beyond.
The services industry is undergoing its own digital transformation. Maybe can you describe some of the forces that are changing, that are driving change inside services, and how does that affect a company like HCL?
Let me take this maybe before I'll first say maybe a statement or two just about how, some of the overarching changes in the IT landscape, which I think are pretty fascinating. So, just about 50 years ago, the average lifespan of a Fortune 500 company was about 60 years. By 2010, that had shrunk down to 18 years. At the very same time, the number of $1 billion startups, if you can call it, in the last decade had grown from 42 to north of 100. And at the very same time, there are some estimates that would say that by 2020, 3/4 of the Fortune 500 companies did not exist as of today. And that was about a year or two ago. So when you look at that, so what are kind of the trends or the changes that are happening that are driving that level of disruption in the marketplace? And I would suggest it's probably three things. One is technology is the great equalizer. So everybody has access to technology today. Number two, there's a significant change in customer expectations as customers become increasingly familiar and empowered in the digital age. And then third, I think traditional brick and mortar companies are seeing an unparalleled level of competitive forces, particularly from the, call them, born digital or native digital companies that are very nimble, very fast, and that are moving and in fact do not have to deal with underlying infrastructure challenges that they may have had. So what does this mean for the services industry? When talking to our customers, looking at some of the advisors that we work with, whether it's the ISGs of the world or not, we believe that so there's a few things that are happening. The services industry in general, the contract sizes, the very large contracts, are actually getting a little bit smaller. The duration of these contracts are also getting a little bit shorter. But interestingly enough, the actual number of sourcing and services contracts, both in the US and in Europe, are increasing. And as we look into 2016, what our customers are saying, they're going to look to HCL and other service providers to even source more functional areas than ever before. But what they're specifically looking for is not only a cost equation, but a value play. And the themes that come up when you speak to CIOs is, help me on my digitalization journey. Help me understand how smart things or IoT can be leveraged in my industry. Help me understand how I can leverage or use automation to my benefit. Do you have any thoughts on robotics? So in other words, the appetite for CIOs and customers to engage with companies like HCL and to look to us on their transformation story is incredible, but I think it behooves us, and we are in investing quite heavily in various areas to do so in the areas I just mentioned.
So your customers are having greater expectations of you in terms of what? Where do those expectations of you lie in terms of these transformational forces?
I think I would anchor it back in a couple of things, that we've seen, again, speaking with our customers and looking at the industry at large. We call it, what are the changes in the enterprise space around the 21st century enterprise? And here are like 4 or 5 tenets, and again, we kind of validated this in one of our recent customer advisory councils. One of the first tenets is we have clearly moved to an environment that is exceptionally, call it customer-centric, experience-centric. And it speaks to that customers have a different level of expectation just about at every time when they have a touch point with you as a company. 21st century enterprise also expects to be agile and lean. It's very clearly increasingly outcome focused. So particularly in our industry, it's no longer just about service level agreements, but specific outcomes. And then maybe most importantly, one of the areas that we see is there is a tremendous amount of ecosystem play that's increasingly building up. And this could be an ecosystem of your customers, your supply chain, your own ecosystem actually with your employees, other partners. And so 21st century enterprises are literally demanding from, and in fact, if they want to survive, these are kind of the tenets that they need to think about. One of the very interesting comments, both, and I'll just summarize from these advisory councils was, and the underlying elements to do some of that is data and insight. There was a lot of discussion also about the importance of a company to emotionally connect with the millennials. Again, most of the workforce today is increasingly motivated by experiences, not just, in various levels. And so what I would suggest is that if you're in the services industry, but probably in other industries as well, those are drivers that have to be addressed. And if you are, whether you're a manufacturing company, or if you're an automotive company, or if you're a financial services company, or maybe in life sciences, the notion of customer centricity, agility, and lean, the notion of having an ecosystem that you need to tap into, those are key elements, and the underlying technology is what's going to allow a company to become a 21st century enterprise, or at least certain processes or parts of it. And those are kind of the drivers that we see, and we've positioned ourselves as a company to build on our traditional services, but I've also invested quite heavily in some new capabilities.
But Matt, just to push back ever so slightly on you, you're talking about technology, but the digital change, the digital transformation change that's taking place, it's not really about technology, even though technology is a part of it. So maybe can you broaden it to the place it all in the business context?
Yeah, no, I would suggest, and if I misspoke earlier, let me clarify here. We firmly believe that technology is the underpinning that will allow companies to become a 21st century enterprise, right? But the notion of, ensuring that your customers have a unique experience at every touch point, and that you can basically integrate your entire ecosystem, or that you take advantage of the data that's being generated from a whole range of smart devices, so that you can drive a higher level of interaction with your customers, that you may be able to do predictive type of efforts. If you're in manufacturing, you may do predictive maintenance, or you may do remote maintenance, frankly speaking, and you use the data to drive specific analytics so that you can minimize the downtime of your equipment, right? Or if you're in transportation, you use fleet management control and fuel optimization analytics to drive higher levels of efficiency, right? Those are the business elements. Or if you're in healthcare, right, you deploy technology to create a new level of security in the disbursement of drugs, right, which is a huge issue. You start to go into areas of smart, in the pharma industry, development of drugs. The key point being, all of these are increasingly possible because technology is pretty much fundamentally available, but are companies taking advantage of those technologies to drive the types of interactions with their respective customers in some of those respective sectors. So that's what I would suggest. And in that context, a company like HCL and others, it behooves us to help customers on that transformation, as opposed to immediately going into a very deep technology discussion only.
That's quite interesting, because historically, service outsourcers like HCL were very focused on the technology component of the outsourcing. But now, what you're describing is a much greater focus on customer outcomes. Maybe
I would suggest two things here, right? Look, one of the reasons why I believe HCL has enjoyed the growth rates that we've been able to demonstrate is because we have a very strong engineering services and infrastructure services background. We have exceptionally strong technology skills, and I would not want to misguide anyone that I think those skills ultimately are key differentiators that allow us to help companies with their transformation. But in the spirit of change and in the spirit of what customers are requiring, they're basically, as I said earlier, asking us, look, I clearly need to run my business model more efficiently, but can you help me transform the customer experience? We invested heavily since we last spoke into what we call our Beyond Digital business unit. We hired over 100 people, and we're now in a position to select customers, help them with design thinking. We're working on persona-based type of efforts, and then ultimately connecting a front end, whether it's a mobile environment, a web-based environment, or other environments, connected into the technology stack, into the applications and infrastructure, right? And so, again, I think that the real winners in this marketplace will be the ones who can, on the one hand, articulate and understand the pressing business issues of their respective customers, but make no mistake, the underlying technology and the skills and expertise to simplify, to also automate, to orchestrate, to bring your application and infrastructure environment together are still and will continue to be critical components. Because again, keep in mind, most of the Fortune 500 or even the Fortune 2000 are still traditional brick and mortar companies, right? We love to speak about the Ubers and the Airbnbs and the Facebooks and the Googles of the world, right? Yes, they're the digitally born, they're the new companies that we all aspire to be. But if you have a 100-year-old company that has an existing infrastructure, you will need to simplify your infrastructure. You will have to find ways to further streamline, automate your existing technology stack while transforming your business into a digital type of business model as well. So exciting times, and obviously will take some time for, across various sectors.
What does this all mean for the CIO and for IT? It's such a turbulent time for that group. And where's the role of IT in this customer-centric world that you're describing?
Look, I'm the marketeer here. I sometimes think that the role of the CIO and the role of the CMO in many ways is actually quite interesting, and there are parallels, right? I think first and foremost, and I will choose to take a glasses half full kind of perspective here, right? So if you're the CIO of a bank, or you're the CIO of a traditional brick and mortar company, you're probably confronted with, the following 2 or 3 kind of issues. You have the core information technology, everything that has to do with information. You have your increasingly, IT issues that have to do with customer-facing applications. And then you still have your entire underlying existing infrastructure, which is basically your operational IT. And what you're going to be asked to do is you're going to be asked to do a few things. You have to, and this goes back to my earlier comment, how do you create an agile, but also a lean IT environment that on the one hand is flexible enough, right, to meet the demands of a 21st century enterprise? And what does that mean? Are you fast and quick enough to deploy new digital applications? Can you actually implement new services? But at the same time, are you lean enough, and can you also use automation or autonomics and orchestration to further simplify your IT, that it's flexible enough, and all of that at a cost point so that you can actually support the business at hand. So for those CIOs who are embracing this and who are saying, look, I have an opportunity, I am the expert in technology, I am actually going to help the CMO, I'm going to work with the head of sales to build an infrastructure that can achieve the things I just mentioned, while also at the same time ensuring that the existing infrastructure, continues to improve, run securely, but also, becomes scalable and increasingly uses autonomics and automation to further improve that. I think for those CIOs, this is going to be a tremendous opportunity moving forward. For others who may be more comfortable to just run the existing infrastructure and ensure that there are no major issues, I think in some of those organizations we've seen, some new roles come into play. The chief digital officer, right, who very often, acts as almost a peer to the CIO, sometimes reports directly, into the CEO or into the CMO, right? I think it's contingent upon the specific industry and also the specific organization and the history. But personally, I think the opportunities for CIOs are there to have a significant impact and to, maybe most importantly, demonstrate a direct impact on the business outcomes, maybe the growth agenda of the business. And therefore, you can actually, as a CIO, move away from this notion of being, in quotes, a cost center, which both, the IT department and marketing department occasionally, have been, I wouldn't say accused, but, sometimes if you're not careful, you can very easily be put in that bucket.
How can a CIO who is listening to this and sees the opportunity, but is not necessarily sure how to traverse the gap between traditional IT, maintaining operational integrity of systems and so forth, and then make the leap to the kind of business innovation activities that you were just describing?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Michael. I think one of the elements, and I'm going to try to give you an industry perspective, and obviously I'm here representing HCL, right? I think one of the challenges that we face in the IT industry in general, and in others as well, this is a highly dynamic marketplace, new skill development, new skills required. And I think what you're going to find as a CIO and possibly as a CMO as well is you're most likely not going to have access to all of those skills in-house. And, part of what I think is, and this is why, again, I believe the services industry, which I don't know how many times over the last 15 to 20 years has been proclaimed as, this is the end of the service industry, but it's still moving today and it's still growing quite significantly. I think the reason for that is that you have to decide at one point how much of your IT, your traditional IT, or maybe your new apps development or of your digital processes, do you choose to maybe partner with a third party, maybe with a services company? And I think right therein, in fact, lies the value proposition that hopefully a company like ours can bring to bear and say, look, we're an expert in this specific area. We can help you with your infrastructure. If you'd like to move into the IoT space, which is, smart things, smart devices that are connected, we have a tremendous amount of experience due to our engineering services. And I think in that context, and again, I've had the pleasure to work with many CIOs lately. Particularly, I think the U.S. is one of the most advanced markets with respect to services. But we see it also now very strongly in Europe, where companies are realizing that, I don't have to do everything on my own in my own shop, and I can actually partner with companies to help on that journey.
What about changes that are taking place in marketing? We've been discussing the technology and the impact on IT. You're CMO of a very large organization, so how does all of this affect the marketing operations?
Yeah, I think when I described earlier, the notion of a 21st century enterprise, experience-centric, outcome-based, agile, lean, ecosystem-centric, the notion of an empowered customer, which I'm a very strong believer in, I think is everywhere. And it kind of changes the paradigm, I believe, just about for everyone in marketing, whether you're in the B2B or in the B2C space, right? What it means is that at any given point, a customer, when they eventually engage with you in the buying cycle, and whether we look at the Forrester number or there's a few others, chances are that that customer has already gone through a good portion of the buying cycle by simply gathering information and having become very, very smart and intelligent on their own. And I think for us as marketeers, there's a few things that are super important. One, your brand, your brand, your value proposition as to who you are, I think is magnified and even more important than ever before. And the reason is because all the different touch points where somebody will experience you gets amplified, magnified, right? Whether somebody finds you through a search, where they'll interact with you on a social media chat, or they have, receive an electronic invoice, or they actually end up calling a call center, or they actually interact with you in person through a salesperson. The key question remains, are you consistent in your experience? And then, is your experience with the brand authentic with those who you interact with? And I think it fundamentally changes how we need to think about marketing. It also, in my view, puts a huge emphasis on finding the right balance between clearly, and I always say, right, it's a saying that's been used quite a bit. We're not talking about digital marketing. We're talking about marketing in a digital world. And the notion here is you have to take advantage of the various platforms that are available to you. But I would still suggest from an experience perspective, don't underestimate the face-to-face interaction as well, right? So it's actually very, very exciting time. And then the one thing, and I'm happy to go into some more details on, specifically elements that can be deployed. But the other part that's not to be underestimated, the rate and pace of change, speed to market, the ability to try new things, the ability to, I'm not a big fan of fail fast, but I do believe that you have to try. You have to have a culture of experimentation. You have to have a culture where you encourage your teams to try new things, and when they work, then you scale them very quickly. When they do not work, you move away and you choose to try new things. Very important. Our cycles, and you just have to take a look at the news cycle, right? The news cycle by itself is turned upside down nowadays, but as a marketeer, you have to take all of those into consideration.
We have a question from Arsalan Khan on Twitter, who asks, does HCL take lessons that you learned on client engagements and apply them internally inside HCL? And if so, how do you do that?
Oh, that's a great question. And what was the name of the lady again? Sorry.
It's a gentleman, Arsalan Khan.
Arsalan Khan. So, apologies, but I appreciate the question. That's in fact what you just mentioned is in part the design point of our customer advisory councils. So we run them at least once or twice a year per geography. We also occasionally run customer advisory councils where we bring our customers together in across geographies, and the whole design point is to share with them where we're going directionally, but then most importantly to listen. And I can tell you from, again, having gone through that for 2+ days, both in North America and Europe, it's the customers speak, they tell us what's working, they tell us what's not working. It's at times slightly uncomfortable, right? You feel a little bit like the emperor without any clothes. But the reason why we do this as a company is because we think it's of paramount importance to learn from our customers as to where and how we can improve. And you'd be surprised. That can be from, how do we further improve our, client-facing interactions in a specific geography, to some operational elements, to, other, in some instances, training-related efforts. But what we try to do as a company, we do them, we document them, we interact with our customers, following up those. In fact, we actually, in many instances, continue the dialogue, and then every 6 months we go back and use this as a vehicle to help become a better company. It may seem fairly trite in some ways, but I can tell you we take it very seriously, and I truly appreciate the spirit of the question.
Actually, it's funny. To me, it doesn't seem trite at all, but it's one of those things. I spend a lot of time with enterprise software vendors as an analyst, and my analyst peers provide advice and feedback to software companies, and I think that the listening aspect is particularly difficult. It's easy to sit down in a room with people to offer feedback, but incorporating that feedback and actually listening and learning from it is extremely difficult to do.
Yeah, and we, again, I thank you for saying that, Michael. I think what we try to do is, right, we're very proud of the, our customers who entrust us with a tremendous amount of their business. And so when we invite, CXOs in this context, many instances it's CIOs, it's also CTOs, and sometimes head of supply chain, we take their comments very seriously. But what we also do in the spirit of a 21st century enterprise, right, we invest quite some time and effort every year in an extensive CSAT survey, where we try to interview actually over 2,000 decision makers. We also engage at various times of the year in particularly in preparation for some of these interactions with our customers. And what I would just suggest to everyone is, at the end of the day, as much as one as a company may be on the right trajectory and may have a strong strategy and an ability to execute, having an open dialogue and listening at times to comments that are a little bit difficult to hear actually shows, at least the feedback we receive, our customers really appreciate it. They're saying, look, we appreciate that you're giving us a forum. It's always done by, the Japan rules, right? It's completely confidential. None of the comments ever go anywhere. And it's actually one of the highlights I can personally tell you that I look forward to, being in a room with 15 to 20 customers to learn.
We're almost out of time. We have about 5 minutes left. Matt, can you give us advice on how to be a good services client? So in other words, what advice do you have to clients to get the maximum value out of the relationship with a services provider such as HCL or any services provider?
I think it's very interesting, Michael. It's a great question, because as we start new relationships with customers, that question actually comes up more often. And one of the things that we actually tell all of our customers is, just please approach the relationship the same way we try to do it. Approach it open. Approach it with a level of, trust that we need to build with each other, and be as transparent about what's working and not working. And, what I can tell you is that, just like with any relationship, when you help a company on their own transformation, the notion of openly resolving issues. I mentioned this maybe earlier, but we've actually invested quite heavily lately in what we call innovation labs across the world, where we bring our customers together and then co-create and have dialogues together. So the best relationships are always those that I consider to be win-win for both parties. The only way you get to a win-win is when you're open, when you build a level of trust, when you feel comfortable to tell someone when something doesn't work. And we actually believe very strongly in that. So for anyone who's listening, who may be an HCL customer or may be contemplating to become one, you can quote me on that, and we'll appreciate the open dialogue.
But that's not always so easy to do. So what advice then do you have for folks that are listening? How do you develop that kind of culture that is willing to be open, transparent? That's where a lot of companies have a great deal of difficulty.
Yeah, I would suggest that, and again, I'm just reflecting on a few of our recent partnerships that we have entered with our customers. Almost invariably, I will tell you, as we get to know each other through usually the RFP process, and then as there comes eventually a relationship starts with some form of a contract. I will tell you, most of our customers who onboard and who work with us say some very positive things through the process of getting to know us. And what we do quite frequently as well is we invite them very early on to visit some of our technology centers in India. So quite frequently we have many long-standing relationships. We invite people to come to India for a week or two, see firsthand where some of our technology locations are. The same here in the US, right? We have delivery centers in Seattle, in Frisco, in Cary, North Carolina, in Rochester, New York. And I think it's just something, you have to build. We as a company believe in that. And, the customers that we interact with give us very high marks. And, kind of going back where we got started with respect to culture, it's kind of ingrained in who we are and how we like to work with our customers.
Fantastic. Well, unfortunately, we're out of time. We've been talking with Matt Preschern, who is the Chief Marketing Officer of HCL Technologies, a $7 billion services and outsourcing provider. And Matt is here talking with us despite having the flu. And so, Matt, thank you so much for taking the time today.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much for having me. And I hope my energy level was high enough, but I'm doing the best I can. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Oh, you were great. And everybody, next Friday, we will be speaking with Quentin Clark, who is the Chief Business Officer of SAP. He's a member of their executive board, so he's a real bigwig at SAP, and that's going to be a very interesting conversation. Thanks so much for watching episode number 165 of CXOTalk. We'll see you next time, and bye-bye.